Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we make math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Subnani. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are so excited about this conversation that we're going to be having with Fluency and with Jennifer Bay Williams. I'm hoping that you know her work from any of these books. They take a whole section in my bookshelf. But we're going to be talking fluency, and we're really excited about that. If you would like to join in on the conversation, you can do that on Facebook, Twitter, or on YouTube, and we will try and get your comments in as we can, or answer them later. So please go ahead and give a follow in those spaces. Additionally, if you are interested, we'll put a plug out for this as well. Math Activators by these two people is out right now, and you can access it at Didax. So
yeah, super exciting to have our book out. So let's get to it, right? We are going to be talking to Jennifer Bay Williams today, and I'm going to read her bio. Jennifer Bay Williams has been a teacher or teacher educator for over 30 years. She is a prolific author. Most recently, she has been writing about math fluency. Those books include the Figuring Out of Fluency series, which is 6 books with guidance and hundreds of activities to support the development of real math fluency, and Math Fact Fluency, which offers 5 fundamentals to effective teaching of basic facts. She is a co-author on the iconic elementary and middle school Teaching Developmentally, as well as the Everything You Need for Math Coaching book. Within all of these books and her many articles are a focus on ensuring that every child becomes competent and confident in mathematics. Jennifer is frequently invited to work with districts and organizations to support effective mathematics teaching. She lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and enjoys gardening, horses, and travel. So let's bring her in. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to be here with you.
Yes, we are super excited to talk to you today because fluency is the bane of everybody's existence, I think. Unfortunately, I wish that everyone knew how to do what you know how to do. So
we're very excited about this conversation. I've been like snapshotting pictures of the book as I've been reading and writing notes. So I would definitely recommend them for everyone as well. But I'm sure we will get into that as we continue this conversation.
Yeah.
We love to start with this question. What is your math story?
Well, I'm going to start with my math story as a learner, which is not really all that interesting. I've heard so many really interesting stories of how people made their way through K-12. But for me, I was just good at math. And so my memories are, for example, sitting in a second grade classroom where they were doing, put the big hand on the 1 and the little hand on the 3. And I'm just sitting there going, do we have to keep doing this? Like, what is so hard about this? It's 3:00. And then fast forward to other things where I'm like, gosh, how many times do we have to go over this? And anyway, so I had really... but that didn't make me like it, really. I just felt like it wasn't really all that interesting because it was just so basic. And so anyway, so that takes me up to about my transition to middle school. And they wanted me to move into a really early algebra. But with my parents, we agreed that was a bad idea. Still today, not a great idea to start algebra too early. But as a result, I remember taking all of 7th grade math. And, one of the things we say in teaching is it'd be nice anytime you go to a workshop or anytime you're teaching a lesson, you always have one takeaway. Well, I had one takeaway, not for the day, but for the year. There was one thing in 7th grade that I hadn't already learned in elementary school at the time. And that was the algorithm for finding the square root. Super useful. Not even taught today. So that was it. That was the only thing there. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like this is, anyways. So anyways, that was my, and then I got to high school and I really got into some interesting math doing, but I also really knew I was never going to become a teacher. So that takes me off to college.
Good.
And so this is where I
I'm glad
transitioned.
I'm glad you knew that.
I go to college and the math is easy. So I'm like taking math classes. And so all of a sudden I have to pick a major. And I really did not want to be a math major. And I really hadn't found a major I liked. But my freshman year, I had volunteered at an elementary school and I worked with a student in third grade who was working on his math facts and had been flunking his tests. So I got put in a room with some flashcards and this kid, and here, please help him. And so I did. And I came back a week later, and the specialist, the curriculum specialist, whoever, who was my organizer, she came and met me at the door and she's like, what did you do with, let's call him Adam. I always call him Adam, but that's not his real name. What did you do with Adam? Well, of course, when you ask me that, I'm like terrified that I've done something wrong. Like, I'm like, we just went through the flashcards. That's all we did. She's like, no, really. The teacher wants to know because he got 100% on his math test. And I'm like, oh, well, let's see. What did we do? Mm-hmm. Well, we sorted the cards. I pulled out the ones that I thought were easier. And it was clear he had no confidence. So I'm like, well, I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, well, I don't know my facts. And I'm like, well, this is a big stack. Let's just take a look. So I started pulling some out and I'm like, well, this one, well, this one, well, this one. And so then I'm like, so then he'd get stuck on one. I'm like, okay, that'll go over in the one we're working on pile. So that's how we started. And then we just started working on the ones and there was a pretty small pile of what he didn't know. But anyways, so that was a pretty cool thing. And that's when I started taking education courses. So that was that's when I thought, all right, well, I'll keep doing this math thing. I was almost done with my math major. So but I can do something I really love, which is teach. So that's my math story.
I love that story because nobody thinks to do something that's quite so simple. And you, with no education background, just went in and was like, oh, well, we're just going to sort them.
Right. So sorry about my cat.
We have done some work together with teachers in Zimbabwe, which obviously is always done like this. And there's always a cat coming
walking through. Yes. We have 4 cats, and that one loves to appear on webinars. She's otherwise shy, but she does like to show up.
It's my time.
Yeah,
I'm here. I see the camera's rolling.
She's a shy movie star.
Let me pop over. So anyways, my teacher story, briefly, is that I did end up being a middle school teacher. And after 1 year of teaching, I was really disillusioned with it because my students didn't like it. I was very skill oriented. We were doing the Madeline Hunter model, very direct instruction. I had lots of behavior issues. And so that summer I took classes, every class I could take on how to teach math at the University of Missouri. And so I came back my second year. I had read the curriculum and evaluation standards for school mathematics by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And now I knew how to teach. And so anyways, I didn't teach like anybody else, but I started doing like whatever. I mean, to me, I couldn't do worse. So I would just start trying small groups. I tried discussion, all the things. And activities, and my students were completely different. I had some of the same students. Mm-hmm. I was a different teacher. They were different students. I never had a behavior trouble. But when my principal walked in to evaluate me, I had to revert back to the direct instruction because I got a bad evaluation for my small group work because I wasn't doing direct instruction. So that was my teaching. And then I moved to a new district and I was working with, I just have to share this story because these particular students really changed my life. And it was a 9th grade applications course, the lowest 9th grade offering. They were still 2 years away from algebra as 9th graders. Wow. And so they really didn't want to be in that class. And they certainly didn't want to learn from this white girl. I was in St. Louis. And so I was really, really, really struggling. And so luckily the district math specialist brought me some real application books, like real meaningful stuff to do. And so we put our textbooks away and we talked about careers and how they use math. And we just went to work. They could pick a career they wanted to explore and would look at the mathematics in that career. And it was transformative. Like within 2 weeks, these students who hated being there and were as rambunctious as could be. My classroom management's never been that great. My answer is always better instruction. So anyways, those students in that class really responded to being treated as, adults, young adults, that really needed a purpose for learning math. And I had to work super, super hard to get ready every day, but it was an incredible experience for me, and forevermore helped me realize the cultural relevant aspects of teaching, like how can I respond to their learning needs, and also that leap of faith. Oh yeah, they can do hard problems. They can start with hard problems. They don't need to do these skills that they've been learning year after year. So that's probably long-winded, but that's what sold me on teaching as a lifelong endeavor, for sure.
Right, but isn't it interesting how the things that impacted you the most are things that are so the antithesis of the way that you learned, and the reason why you didn't find math to be all that interesting.
That's right. It's
the exact opposite.
That's right. It is definitely interesting. And to me, part of the symmetry is that I was a middle school teacher, then a high school teacher, then an elementary math specialist, but I found my way back to Atom and basic facts as my real passion. So I've been on this like circle all the way back to where I first started thinking about becoming a teacher. So I just that's just a precious memory for me.
And I love the idea of an applications course that's real, right? I sometimes think, your freshman year or ninth grade year, like there should be almost like a quarter or semester where that is the math. Like, okay, what things are you interested in exploring before we jump into all of these other traditional pathways or whatnot? Like, what are the careers that you're interested in exploring, and what's the math that they use? Because there's not one that doesn't. It's that idea of how do we make all of the things that come after that seem like math in service of other math, really, more accessible and more real to the students who are in front of us.
Absolutely. I couldn't have been more excited when I was told I'd be teaching ninth grade applications, because I'm like, thank goodness I'm going to finally know how math is really useful. So then I got the textbook. The textbook was just like all the skills books I'd already had. And I'm like, where are the applications? I'm not seeing the applications. These story problems are not applications. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
So actually finding real application tasks was, I did it with the help of my district supervisor. I couldn't have done it on my own, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that stuff, because it's not so prevalent, is something that you need to talk about with other people. Like, how do we go down this road? You don't have any experience with this, and there's a lot of ways you can go, I would imagine. Yeah. My daughter is taking, she's in her senior year, and she's taking I don't know, it's her last math class, but it's real math. She's like, oh, she's taking it in night school, and she's like, no, it's not like the school math. It's real math, she said. I was like, oh, you're doing something you will be using, I guess. That's what you mean by real math. So yeah, it's funny.
So true.
Oh no, let's not do that yet. Let's talk about this. I'm fast forwarding. So let's talk about your question, because I feel like every teacher on the face of the planet needs to learn this, even if they are good at it. I feel like every year is a new year, and every year presents itself with new issues. So how do we ensure that every student develops flexibility and fluency in math class?
Right. So we could talk about this for hours, but let's start with making sure we have the right goal in mind. So I put flexibility there with and fluency, even though flexibility is nested under fluency, to be clear. Because when we say it's like, Molly, you said it's the bane of our existence. Well, we get into this rote practice of getting skills down. That's not fluency work. So, I mean, the beginning of ensuring this is making sure we're clear on the goal. If we don't know where we're going, we're not going to get there. And so I feel like fluency gets misused all the time in math. So if you think about math fluency more like reading fluency, you think about how you're like able to read a text, comprehend a text, use different intonations if you're reading aloud, those sort of things. And in math, that fluency is not just you have an algorithm for said problem, but that when you look at that problem, if you have a variety of strategies and you can tell by the numbers in the problem which ones are good choices for that problem, and that's the flexibility piece. So there is a understanding of fluency that's necessary to ensure that thing. When we prepare students just with algorithms, we're not making sure we're working against flexibility. And in today's world, that's less important than ever.
Yeah.
Anything that's algorithmic can be done with a computer.
Well, I think, it's one of those big cultural changes within the United States too that we have to make as far as like our conversation around that, and with community members, with parents, with like, I think sometimes that's one of the biggest barriers to really doing this work. If we're trying to do it in a way that is flexible, in a way that gives students strategies and lets them wrestle with reasonableness and all of those elements that make up fluency, and then at home, or like, no, that's not, we're just going to flashcard you to death, like, in a way that doesn't, because that's the way that we learned it as adult parents. And so, it's that communication with the communities around us. I think that is such a huge piece of this work of, this is what we mean by fluency. And these are the reasons why it needs to look different than how we maybe experienced it as children ourselves.
Yeah, I think the why is important. It's important for families to hear the why. It's important for teachers and administrators to hear the why, because real fluency takes longer to develop than just getting an algorithm down. And so why commit to that extra time? How are you going to find that extra time? And, there's so much pushback on, like, I don't know, things that get attributed to the Common Core. I'm not going to say they're in the Common Core because that's a whole other thing, because there's just a lot of things attributed to that document from people who have never looked at it. So, anyways, but this whole idea of fluency and flexibility is a bigger task, because you have to make sure students have access to different strategies. They're not going to choose an efficient strategy if they don't have a repertoire. So you have to start with really teaching each of the different strategies that are really useful. There's a lot of not useful ones out there, but some really useful strategies. And then once they are adept at using a strategy, then they're ready to choose. And that's when they, really develop that true fluency.
So it's interesting because I feel like so many teachers are going to fight against that whole idea of teaching all of the strategies. And I would say that's probably in particular for certain things, right? Like how many different subtraction strategies there are. Teachers get frustrated with that because subtraction is hard. And if they don't relate it to addition right from the get-go, then all of those subtraction strategies are even more difficult for students, making the whole learning of subtraction very difficult. But I do feel like one thing that I've kind of latched onto, and mostly because I'm tutoring one student right now, and I have this luxury of kind of exploring what she's thinking about a particular topic. She's in 5th grade, so we're doing fractions and, decimals and multiplication, all of that stuff. And I have such an awesome luxury that I just go with whatever her strategy is, and then we develop her strategy together. Of course, that's really hard for teachers to do when you have 20, 25 students in your classroom, but it is like so nice. Like we get through stuff so quick because we just go with her strategy, and she has a strategy for everything. Like it's in her. I don't have to teach her. Sometimes I'll say, oh, do you want to know how I did it? Because I did it different, just to explore something that's different and see how it's related to hers. But it's such freedom, such freedom.
Right. And that's where that confidence and competence go hand in hand. She's generating ideas. You're trusting that she can come up with her own ideas. You're helping shape it. She's revising her thinking. She's but you're trusting that she can put some of her knowledge to play in that problem, and then add to her knowledge to maybe make that strategy a little bit more efficient. And then you get someone who's going to remember how to do that, who's going to feel get that sense that there isn't just one way to do a problem. There's a lot of options, and you can keep refining your way to get more efficient at it over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wanted.
Sorry, Heidi, I was just going to say, but I'm sure it's related to what you're going to say. Just that's why Number Talks for me was so impactful when I first learned about him, because it was doing what you were just saying, like converging all of those thoughts together and trying to make sense of why they connect so that you can broaden your own depth of understanding.
So when I was reading this book here, for everyone who's at home,
which she's been texting me about, she's like, everyone needs to read this book.
These are my. So I think one of the issues that we run into in classrooms and with teachers that we work with, or systems, is that it seems so big and insurmountable, right? Like, so if we have to do all of this, right, or like this textbook series that we're using presents all these things one day after another new strategy, or others that don't do that. I mean, thankfully there are some better options out there than that, but that used to be the way that it was done for a while. Can you talk a little about the significant 7 and how that would, like, for me was like, okay, yes. Okay, because we can do 7 things.
Yeah.
We can do 7 things across all the districts or all the grade levels, right? Like we can focus on 7 like core ideas that kind of follow through. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about the thinking behind that and share a little more for people.
Sure. So the 7 significant strategies are across all 4 operations. There's really 7 strategies that are worth your while, is what I'll say. You could add to that, but in terms of, again, we're talking about all students. So these are strategies that are super useful. They work for whole numbers. They work for fractions, decimals. They're efficient ways to solve problems, more efficient than a standard algorithm when the numbers fit the situation. So that's what they are. And it's not 7 for subtraction. Right. It's like 4 for subtraction, because of course they're overlapping. Like one of them is use the inverse. So for subtraction, that's the think addition strategy. And then for division, that's, think multiplication. So that's, one strategy. So that's it. But the strategies just totally pay off. And I'll just take you through one of those strategies. It's the strategy that is making tens. So it starts with basic facts. And this is why it's worth the time investment with basic facts to not just have them memorize 9 + 6, but to take the time to help them see that they could move 1 from the 6 over, and that's the same as 10 + 5. They've made a 10. And so that's a useful strategy. It's place value strategy, because they can add 19 + 6 that way. They can move 1 over and think of it as 20 + 5. They can add 29 + 16, moving 1 over and making it more of a mental problem. And so it pays off for whole numbers. 99 + 74. Who wants to add that? But you see students stack that up and just go to their regrouping instead of thinking, "Ooh, I could just move 1 over, 100 + 73." So this is the ridiculous behavior that unfortunately we encourage when we only do an algorithm approach. So we've done make a 10, making tens. And I just gave an example of making 100 or making 200s. But let's go to the fractions that Molly was talking about. Think about like 2 7/8 plus 2 7/8, just to keep it simple. I mean, numbers we can remember because it's the same number. So the way that's oftentimes taught, the algorithm would be to add. Okay, we'll just leave that. Everyone already knows.
Really feel well.
We could make a whole number. So let's just take one of those 8s over from the one over to the other. Now we have 3 plus 2 6/8. I was recently showcasing the strategy for room full of people working with teachers who work with students with special needs. And they were like, what? Does this always work? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Let's see, why would it work? And just like showing how you can pull an eighth off, like you're just decomposing, just like we decomposed whole numbers, and then, recomposing it. So it works for fractions. And then the same.
Go. Keep going. Sorry, I'm just very.
Then the same would be true with like 2 and 9/10. Picture the decimal, 2 and 9/10 plus 2 and 9/10. Let's just move a tenth over, and then you have make a whole. You had the whole number 4, and now whatever I said, 3 and 9/10.
Yeah.
And so you just move that over to make a whole, and that is an easier strategy. And then that moves up to working with integers. So if you have like 7 plus -3, you can think about making a 0. So take that 7 and break it apart. The 3 and the -3 make a 0, and you broke that 7 apart. You've got 4 left over. So that is right. So this whole idea of like decomposing to make, a friendlier number is so useful. It's so useful a lot of the time. And also, Heidi, you had mentioned earlier reasonableness and estimation. That's oftentimes what our go-to way of like coming up with an estimate is to go to a benchmark. So it's a very similar idea.
It's so crazy because I think because of the history of mathematics teaching and that it's been so teacher driven that people don't actually believe that kids can do what you just said. And I have always believed. However, I am just with this student, like she's been learning direct teaching. She's homeschooled. Her mother is wonderful and lovely and everything. She doesn't actually have a teaching background. So she's teaching in the way that the book is teaching and whatever. She's doing a fine job. And so this student has grown up fairly traditional, and she is decomposing fractions, and like it is in them. Like I can teach her strategies. I sure can do that. But I can just encourage her to do what she already knows how to do. Also, like that for me was, I'm like, you haven't been doing decomposing this whole time, but you can decompose and you do it naturally. Like, OMG, this is the most amazing thing ever. And she continues to just break apart. And for me, it's like going back after we finished fractions and a month later, she's still like able to quickly decompose some fractions like you were just talking about. And I'm like, oh my God, it worked. It really worked.
I love that. And that goes back to ensuring that all students can do it, right? Like, so if they can decompose whole numbers, you can start with a problem like, 19 plus, I don't know, 15. And they're like, oh yeah, I would change that to 20 plus 14. Oh, okay. Yeah. And then you have a very similar fraction problem. And you're like, now could you use that idea over here? So you're nudging them towards the strategy. Like, how could you use that? And of course, the use of manipulatives and all of that to help them see with manipulatives, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to take that piece that's like an eighth and they're going to move it over to make a whole. And you're like, haha. And what would this look like with that symbols? And there you have it. And that is going to be, once you learn that strategy, you're never going to add 2 and 7/8 plus 2 and 7/8 by regrouping. And it's, it's longer, it's more error prone. A fluent person wouldn't use an algorithm to add that problem. A carpenter wouldn't use that strategy.
Yes. I think one thing that's unfortunate is that in order for us to assure that we know that kids can do these strategies, we make them write them down. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but when they have to write down everything that they can do in their head really quick, it seems really long. And so parents and other math naysayers look at it and say, well, why would we teach them that when they can just do this quick algorithm and it's super quick, which I'm sure you've seen 100,000 people on videos saying, about all the strategies and whatever. But it's just unfortunate because in the end, this is going to make them better.
That's right. So I'm a big fan of mental math. I think that other countries outside of the United States value mental math more than we do. The United States obsesses with show all your steps, and that does bog kids down. They oftentimes lose track of their thinking because they're like they wrote a step and now they can't remember where they were at. So if they can keep things in their head, I think that's wonderful. I feel like sometimes, it's one of those, there isn't an exact answer to show your work, don't show your work, because if a student has a wrong answer and they've no record of it, it's really hard to figure out where the thinking went awry. But what I like to do is just kind of play it by ear. So if the student's able to do a problem, like if they're doing 19 plus 26 and they're like, that's 45, then I like to ask them, how did you think about that? Not write down what you did, explain your thinking all the time. It just gets so bogged down because they did something pretty interesting pretty quickly. So that was, in my opinion, a fluent approach. So why am I going to like send them backwards to what they might have done, earlier when they were just learning the strategy or showing the strategy or whatever. But there is that pacing where for them to think about other strategies like partial sums, keeping it all in your head's too much. So you want to write down what you need to keep track of your work. But writing down every step when you don't need to is not the way mathematicians work.
Right.
And it's certainly not how you're going to get your ACT done on time. I've just been working with my son on shoring up, like, could we combine a few steps here so that, so you can get done with the test on time. And that's of course not efficient to write down steps that you don't need. So that's the sweet spot is what do you need to keep track of your thinking? That's the amount that you write down.
Yeah.
Well, and having, if we're doing it in a number talk format, having a teacher or someone else who can describe that thinking, like, so I'm not worried about writing it down. I can just explain to you what it is. And someone else is recording that process for me. So I'm not, thinking and writing back and forth between the two.
Yeah. Heidi, I'm super glad you looped back to number talks because I want to say something about what you just said. So when I'm in classroom, sometimes the teachers say, oh, I see all this flexibility. When we're doing a number talk, then they go back to their seats.
Yes.
What's going on? So, let's just start examining why might that be? Well, let's see. With the number talk, we're encouraging the mental math. When they go back to their seat, we're saying, pull out that marker. So it's like they have different, it's like, a person who's learning has parents that speak two different languages.
Yeah.
They know to speak English to this parent, Spanish to that parent, or whatever, right? They sort it out. So they've sorted out that when they're sitting on the floor doing their number talk, they're supposed to be creative. And when they go back to their desk, they're supposed to be algorithmic and write their stuff down. So I feel like they've sorted So I'm saying to the teacher, hey, why don't you say that good creative thinking that you did at the number talk? We're going to put that in action today as we learn, to subtract fractions or whatever we're doing. So let's think about the methods that we can use to do this well. And I think we lose that in transition as they go back to their seats. So I think that's a really important piece. And then the other thing I want to say about number talks is in watching them, I see a lot of strategies go up, but I don't necessarily know that I'll change off of Adam now. I'll go to Heidi.
Yeah.
I don't know that Heidi has a repertoire. If every day Heidi is sharing a partial sum strategy, I'm a little worried that Heidi might not know the making 10 strategy. So then I really need to be a little bit more intentional about a routine in which it's a number talk, but in this number talk, instead of solving the problem today, we're going to say it as a make tens. So I'm going to put up like 29 plus 36. Their job isn't to solve it. Their job is to rethink it as a make tens. And that's a way to make sure that they're getting that strategy in their repertoire and they're feeling good about it. So it's more likely to be put to use, if that makes sense. So I feel like the number talks are good. And I don't want to walk away from this conversation with anyone thinking I don't value number talks. They are the epitome of flexibility. It's about translating that flexible thinking into the core lesson and also making sure that we're focused not on how many strategies we get on the wall, but on how many strategies each individual child has in the repertoire.
I have seen, teachers who really have used I won't say a lot of teachers, but have really used number talks and gotten really savvy with them and will save their number talk from the day before and say, okay, so let's look at David's strategy, and can everyone do this new problem using David's strategy? And they have the number talk from the day before up there, which I think is just so brilliant, because number talks can be just like anything else, right? These secular things that just happen one after the other, and none of them ever are related to each other. But when you get really savvy about number talks, you can really pull
That's right.
things
It's a
out.
way
That's
to,
just so magical.
yeah. And let's go back to cultural responsive classroom, where you want every student to develop a positive math identity and a sense of agency. And you can give that credit to David or whoever, that gives them some power in the classroom for their good thinking. And then you are helping other people see that strategy as one that you want them to try out. So I think some people feel like in a number talk, it should just be what the student wants to use as their reasoning strategy. And I'm a big fan of saying that's fine sometimes, but let's make sure, again, everyone has a repertoire. So let's encourage, try this strategy, see how this works. I do that with work with basic facts as we're working on a strategy for like multiplying, where somebody comes up with a good idea, and then I'm like, all right, that's the strategy I'm going for today. So then I want to say to the class, all right, so that idea that we just heard from these students or whatever, let's try it. Let's see if we can use that for this new, quick look image or whatever, and try it out. And so then we're all, developing that strategy together, and then we have a chance to practice it. I think that's a really good point, is to give that credit to a student and then have that opportunity to get other students to do it.
Yeah.
Could you talk for a moment about the role of games and play in fluency and how those things overlap? Because that was not my experience of learning my facts. There was no playing. There were no games.
Right.
So can you talk for a moment about that?
Right. There's so much to say about that, but of course, it's more fun to play a game than to do a worksheet. Let's just be real. So the fun thing is there, but there are, if you think about like what we know about learning, and this is true for students with special needs, all students, is that think aloud is one of the most powerful strategies. Well, you're not going to think aloud on your worksheet. Your teacher's going to tell you be quiet. You're playing a game. Like I give them sentence frames. They're playing the game. They've got to say the answer and then say the strategy I used was, or if we're working on one strategy, like pretend to 10 for basic facts or whatever, then they talk through, I have a, sentence frame to help them talk through that strategy. So they're playing the game. And they are talking through the strategy. They also have another one of those research-based strategies, peer tutoring, peer support. They do it wrong. They're right there playing a game. Their friend's like, that's not right. Here's the answer to your problem. So you have peer support. It's low stress. So it frees up your mind to just like take risks, try things. You're not stressing about the pressure. So it has all of these benefits. And if you think about like so many of the games that are in the Math Hack Fluency book are ones like, in that book. I'm just going to talk about Lucky 13. Okay. In the game Lucky 13, you draw 5 cards. Each player gets 5 cards or 4 cards. We've modified it to 4 cards on a website that Molly will share later. But they're trying to, from their 4 cards, find the 2 that add to 13, because that'd be lucky. That's the game, Lucky 13, because they'd score 0 points. If they have 2 cards that add to 14, well, they're 1 away from 13. That's 1 point. If they have 2 cards that only add to 10, that's the closest they can get. Well, they get 3 points, and they're trying to not get points. So just in their 4 cards, they're doing, I don't know, like a whole bunch of math problems, a whole bunch of adding problems, just to come up with the combination that's the closest to 13. There's estimation and computation happening. And then, by the way, there's a little subtraction there because they have to find out how far away their number is from 13. So they're doing tons of math to try to, win this game. And no speed. I just want to say, none of the games have a speed, because you need that think time. You need that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the emphasis on speed in so many classrooms, really, that one piece alone sends a message that just ruins so many things for kids, in particular confidence.
It works against fluency. because real fluency, again, is about being able to use strategies. And when students, young students in particular, are in a hurry, they're going to resort back to like counting. They can't think through their strategy. Like, wait, move one over. No, I can't. I'm in a hurry. I'll just count. You know, that's the way it plays out. I mean, I've seen it on hundreds and hundreds of kids. So you're pushing them back to like a more primitive strategy under that time pressure. And that speed pressure then means who's ever done first is the smart kid.
Right.
And that's such a misdirect for what real mathematics is, because mathematics is about, like you think if we're going to reflect the discipline of mathematics and you just think about the real mathematics that's happening, that's emerging all the time in research centers and that happens at high levels, it's about really thinking through stuff and that creative decision-making. Let's try that. It's trial and error, lots of mistakes, but certainly you're not in a hurry because you don't want to make a mistake. Right. So,
yeah. I mean, and if you think about just the history of mathematics alone and certain algorithms that have, or, I don't know advanced mathematics, but like years are spent on solving one problem.
Yes.
And
it's perseverance it's perseverance that matters. It's perseverance that matters, right? Yeah. I mean, that's not to say we don't want automaticity with the basic facts. By the way, we do want that. But the way that but it turns out that putting students under time pressure can delay their progress. You're not getting to the outcome. I mean, I want the outcome of automaticity with facts. I don't want kids bogged down with their facts. No. But the way that you get there is you teach them these strategies, you help them get good at the strategies, and then the practice through these games on, and not just in September, by the way, like all year long, we're revisiting our facts. We're working on our facts. We're doing, and that's where games are also great because you can play a game in like 10 minutes. So, okay, it's Thursday. We have some time. We're going to play a game. We're going to do a game today instead of a number talk, right? So there's lots of places to fit a game in for ongoing practice.
Or when you have a rain at recess and kids come in and they ask to play one of your math games.
I know, right?
Winner.
Total winner.
Right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, how about you tell our listeners about how they can learn more about you and the work that you do?
Well, let's see. What I'm working on right now is continuing this work on fluency. I really feel like the books that Heidi has waved up there it's been my little COVID baby.
It's like a library.
So I'm still working on those. So like the purple book has to do with that yellow book is whole numbers. I think the purple book is one of the ones on fractions. We did a middle school book. We're currently working on one that goes back to these automaticities beyond basic facts. Like, for example, when you're doing the fraction work, I know, right? This was John's idea, not mine. But we're going to go back in the rainbow book, the fluency book. We talk about how there are things you want to be automatic with beyond basic facts. And we always attach automaticity with basic facts. But what about fraction equivalencies? Like we should just know that 6/8 is 3/4. Like really, we're not going to take 3/4 and multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2. No, that's got to be automatic. There's just some things that recur. 425s make 100. There's just things that occur so often that we just want to make sure we have that automaticity because that allows us to do the harder problems without getting bogged down with certain skills. So we're working on those sort of, those really must have at very, automaticities. Yeah. So we're working on that. We're working on that right now. And then, that purple book has been used a lot in math intervention, but it was designed for core instruction. And so Gina and I are
does both.
Gina and I are now doing the sequel that will provide more on explicit strategy instruction, how to do like useful assessments that good data, right? Because if you don't know like combinations of 10, then you're wasting your time to teach making 10 strategy we've talked about tonight. And so how do you know if they know combinations of 10? Well, they could play a game. Heidi, they can pull out a game, like go fish for 10s. And then you have a little observation tool where, you're seeing, are they automatic with those combinations of 10? And if not, what am I going to do about it? So that's what that book will do, is provide a little bit more guidance about what to do when and how to provide extra support. And thank you for flashing up that website. That website.
This is where you said the games are, right?
Yeah. ASCD gave permission for about half the games to be on that site. And so when COVID hit, the Kentucky Center for Mathematics took to doing as many as they had permission for. And those games have, so for the half the games they have, they also did jam boards, student recording pages,
Cool.
and they've all been translated into Spanish.
Yeah. It's
and
really helpful.
Yeah, and assessment tools are there as well. So it's not all the things that are in the purple book, but it's a really good starter set. It's about half the stuff. So so appreciative to the Kentucky Center for Mathematics for doing that work for the community.
Yeah,
and it's
we're really fast too. It's like, wow, okay.
we had a team of people that were going to be out, consulting, and we all had time on our hands, and so we got permission and we went right to work. And they were, vetted with, we did our best to vet them to make sure that instructions were clear and things like that.
Awesome.
So those two books are underway. And then I've really been working on an elementary math specialist program. We've moved it online, and we're trying to make it accessible to whoever would like to pursue a math specialist at the University of Louisville. So that's another project I really care about. I really feel like, again, this whole thing around math intervention and just math support is you need to really have a deep understanding of elementary mathematics. And so often I have like middle and high school teachers like myself learning about place value, and that, whoa, this is crazy. Way more stuff to this than I thought. And basic facts as well, all the things, early childhood, kindergarten math, super complex. So when they're asking somebody in the building that is a general like specialist or a literacy specialist to help with the math problem, they don't necessarily know how to diagnose well, how to support the students or the programs in general. So I'm a big advocate to make sure every school has on hand, ready for that in the moment, must ask somebody who knows stuff person, a math specialist. That's my thing. So I've been trying to work on that from various angles.
Yeah, love that. And if people want to follow you, they can follow you on Twitter here, correct?
That's right. I'm on Twitter. I don't have a website. I'm actually a full-time professor, so don't really have the website development skills, and I have not developed that. But follow me on Twitter. I don't post as much as I should. I'll do my best.
All right, you're a busy lady.
Yeah.
You're a busy lady. Well, we so appreciate you being here with us today. This conversation could have gone on for 2 more hours, I'm sure. But we are just so happy to be able to talk about this, because it's work that every teacher needs to, or at least every elementary teacher needs to know about.
Thank you. I will agree with you on all teachers, right? Flexibility is so critical in like algebra and beyond, that we're not algorithmic. There's so many times where a shortcut is a better method than, the long ways. So it is definitely starts with basic facts and goes all the way up through high school.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been wonderful. I'm always happy to advocate for, real math fluency.
That's right.
efforts,
That's right.
not the rote stuff.
Right. Oh, great. All right. Well, we're happy to have you, and we'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Okay.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
I love it.
Yeah, she's so knowledgeable about fluency, like obviously with the 700 books that you lifted up from your desk.
Yes, well, but
I don't know why you're not like
all in on the subject. I'm going to go all in on a subject.
Well, you go all in with books regardless.
Yeah. So our next show is, we talked a little bit about applied mathematics at the beginning of this show, and we're going to take things in a slightly different direction. Molly and I had the opportunity to hear from a professor at the University of Vermont who does work in the Story Collaboration Lab. I think I'm going to get that wrong.
You're close.
And 2 students from that project are going to be coming in and talking with us on March 22nd about real life math applications and what real life math research can look like and how that interplays with all the things that are like so important to kids right now too. And so we're really excited. So
Yeah.
we hope that you will join us then as well.
Yes. Yeah. We left that presentation like, oh my gosh, so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So until then, we hope that you will keep math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.